Hi everybody, Debbie here with Garden Style. So today I'm going to be covering 3 late winter bloomers that your garden centers are getting in right now. And one of them is probably my favorite perennial of all time, especially for late spring, late winter, early spring. And the second one just brings a ton of color all at once. And my third one, well, I'll leave that one as a surprise. Maybe you can guess what it is I'm going to be talking about. Okay, so just to cover what has happened in this past week, here in the Northwest, we just came out of a real deep freeze that probably lasted about 3 or 4 days. Our average high was 18 to 20 degrees. It was really cold. Got down into the teens at night. And now we have warmed up, like today, which is like a week after my last video. We're at 43 degrees today. We'll probably have a high of 45, 46, and it feels like a heat wave compared to what we just went through. Now there are folks across the country who have suffered sub-zero temperatures, and I really hope you folks are going to start warming up as well this coming week. So lots of new things happening in the nursery this coming week. One is we're starting to bring in some color already for the spring. I'm going to be covering Primroses today, and I'll also be covering Helleborus, which is probably my all-time favorite late winter, early spring perennial. And I'm also going to cover Pussy Willows and willows in general in that family. And I chose these 3 because they're the ones that are starting to show some life at this time of the year, which we're all just hungrily desperate for. And just wanted to keep it simple. But I also wanted to clue you in on Primroses and give you a few ideas with those. Because even though we treat them as annuals here in the Northwest, or the garden centers do, we bring them in like annuals, they are actually perennial in our zone. In fact, most of your Primroses are hardy from zone 4 all the way to zone 8. So pretty neat as far as that's concerned. So I brought a little sample in right here, and this is called Apple Blossom. Isn't that beautiful? It's just, they're so pretty, and they kind of do look like an apple blossom. But these are the kinds of colors that we can start to look forward to in the late winter, early spring. And your nurseries usually start, let's set that down, your nurseries usually start bringing those in abundance. And we've already started selling them this past week. Now Primroses are actually native to Europe and Asia, and they prefer shady areas to part shade. And what I mean by part shade is maybe some early morning sun, but definitely want them in the shade by the afternoon. They like damp areas, so if you have a damp or wet area, Primroses do very well there. And there are so many different kinds in the Primrose world out there that I kind of wanted to cover them with you today and kind of explain to you the best ways to landscape with them and what to look for, because there are some really neat varieties out there that you just don't see everywhere. And of course, I'm always on the hunt for something new, something different, and trying to bring those in here to the nursery. So Primroses are part of the Primula family, which is a huge family. There's probably 420 different types of varieties in the Primula family. So I kind of wanted to open your world a little bit to the different types of primroses that you can find. Now there is a polyanthus primrose, and those usually have their flowers. There'll usually be a long stem that comes up, and you'll have the flowers sitting on top. And of course I'll flash some pictures up here so that you can see what it is I'm talking about. But the polyanthus is usually the most fragrant out of all the primroses that are offered. In fact, some of the what we call annual primroses that we bring here into the nursery, there are some of those varieties that are fragrant as well. But polyanthus is the most fragrant, and they can usually come in a white or like a creamy white or a real pretty yellow. They've also been nicknamed cowslip. I'm not quite sure where cowslip came from, so if one of you happens to know what cowslip or where that particular term came from, let me know, because I'd be very curious to find out. But your cowslips or your polyanthus series is even hardier. They're hardy down to zone 3 to zone 8. And they multiply too. And a lot of these can reseed themselves and propagate themselves wherever it is you put them. So keep an eye out for that. Now some other varieties of primroses. There's double primroses, which we have started carrying here in the nursery, and they're just the most beautiful, amazing, flowers you would ever want to see, especially in late winter, early spring. And you'll see pictures of them there off to the side there. But, oh, they're just stunning. So our breath gets taken away every time we start to get flats of those here in the nursery. There are also round primroses where you have a long stem and it almost resembles like an allium, like a small allium flower, but they're a round globe that sits at the top. There are drumstick. I have my kitty here in the store, so I think she's setting off my front doorbell. So if you... Okay, brief interruption there. Had to let the kitty out the door. Hopefully I'll get a chance to introduce you folks to Mackie. She's this beautiful tabby who adopted us a little over a year ago. She just magically appeared out of nowhere, you know, like cats do. And she decided this is where she was going to live. So, of course, we needed a nursery kitty. She helps keep the mice down, so we adopted her and brought her in. But yes, I had to stop for a minute and let her out. Okay, so anyway, back to it. So there are drumstick type primroses. There are alpine primroses, which are absolutely gorgeous, and they're also low growing. And there are orchid primroses, which are a completely different shape from everybody else. So there's so many varieties out there. I highly recommend you go to gardenia.net. This is where I learned a lot about them before I came on here to do the video. But there are so many varieties out there, and I am really going to keep a sharp eye for some of these, and hopefully I can bring some in here to the nursery. Because it's always nice to get something new and novel, and aside from, you know, your regular, common, everyday primrose, right? Okay, so I can't say enough about primroses. There are two downfalls to primroses, first being slugs. So if you're going to go and plant them out in the garden beds, I highly recommend you put slug bait down with them, because the slugs love them. They're going to want to eat them. So make sure to have slug bait out there before you put them out. Another downfall to them is they hate wet feet. So usually when I go to plant primroses, I will raise them up in the soil just a little bit so that their leaves, which is where they produce most of their flowers from, aren't sitting directly on the soil itself. You can get issues with botrytis, and leaves, of course, starting to rot and fade away off the plant. So those are kind of the two downfalls to primroses. Rabbits and deer may want to munch on them a little bit, but not a whole lot. I've had mine out in the front yard forever and a day, and they've never really bothered them. But some folks say otherwise, so just saying. Keep an eye out for that. But primroses, that's usually the harbinger that spring is not very far away at all. So, okay, so enough about those. My second most favorite perennial in the world are Helleborus. These little beauties right there, okay? And this is just a real common variety. This one is called Mahogany Snow, and you will see these start to bloom in late December, depending on the variety, and they will bloom all the way until April. And this is just one of hundreds of different colors and hybrids that they have come out with. Why do I like Helleborus so much? Because they are tough as nails. I have seen these things come up and bloom in the middle of the snow. This particular variety, let me give you some information as far as hardiness goes. Yeah, they're hardy down to minus 20 degrees. We didn't get that quite that cold here. But yeah, we had some in our lath house. We actually brought them in before our deep freeze last week, and it got down to, you know, 18 degrees out there in our lath house, which is like a cold house. And they looked a little droopy for a couple of days because we never did get above freezing for about 3 days. And now they look amazing. They just snapped right back. They still have their flowers. They're still blooming and sending up more buds. So Helleborus are just tough. Now, they prefer shade. They're a shade lover. And I have planted a bunch underneath my fir trees and hemlocks, where, you know, usually most things cannot grow because it gets so dry. But I've planted Helleborus under there, and I find that they're extremely drought tolerant during the summertime when we get really dry, and they're flourishing. They're doing fantastic. So Helleborus are also evergreen. So after their flowers die back in April, they will hang on to their green leaves. And usually what I do in the late winter, as soon as I see them starting to send up some buds, I will go out there and I'll start trimming off all the icky leaves off the outside and leave the good ones. And that way you can really start to see their blooms when they come into their own. But you can get these in colors of reds, all different shades of reds and yellows and whites, pinks, all different shades of pinks. They'll come as singles, they come in doubles. And the closer we get to February, I have another big shipment coming in probably about the beginning to middle of February. We get the wedding series in, which are really famous for their double flowers. And honestly, it looks like somebody just painted the petals. They're so beautiful. And of course, I'll flash pictures up there as I'm talking here. So yes, one of the main reasons I like Helleborus is because they are tough. And they start sending up blooms early so that you can enjoy some sort of color before spring actually hits. They are also deer resistant. Mine are way out in the front yard. Never had them chewed on by the deer. They don't seem to bother them. They stay low. They're a low grower. They grow from 12 inches probably up to about 20, 24 inches once they get their tall flower stalks on them. And of course they keep blooming. Once they start blooming, they just keep going and going until April. And at that point, I cut off the blooms. I just leave the leaves. I give them a good feeding after they have bloomed for me. And they will go quiet, they go dormant during the summer and the fall, and before you know it, December rolls around and they're sending up blooms again. So Helleborus, by far one of my favorite perennials. If you don't own any, go get some. Now's the time to go get them because they're in bloom and most of your garden centers should have them by now. Alrighty, now the next plant I'm going to talk about are pussy willows. And this is kind of a big guy, so I'm going to get him over here. And this is a shrub. You can see them here in this big pot. But this is what they do at this time of the year. Look at that. And you'll notice this has kind of a pink tinge to it. This is actually a pink pussy willow. And they start to get their catkins. That's what these are called. And they're like furry little coats that are actually protecting the flower on the inside. So this is kind of the plant's way of protecting itself so that it, of course, can propagate later. But if you have a real wet or damp area that you can't seem to get anything else to grow in, pussy willows are fantastic for that. In fact, anything in the willow family, provided you plant them way far away from any type of a septic system or plumbing, because they have very vigorous roots. So vigorous that a lot of times we'll get curly willow in here. They actually have a real curly branch to them. A lot of florists use them. We have put them in water and we'll come back a week later, darn things have rooted themselves. They've got roots, you know, this long on them. In fact, I think I have some over there right now that have rooted themselves. So they're super easy to propagate if you want to have them. But I just warn you as to where you're going to plant them. They do very well in like a drainage ditch or a real low part of your yard where you see water standing all the time. Willows are a fantastic way to help suck up some of that water and help keep the place drier than it normally would, and they'll just thrive in it. You'll notice that your huge weeping willow trees are usually stationed near a lake or a riverbed where they can get ample water, and their root systems can go forever. So just saying, be very careful where you plant them. But if you have damp, wet, boggy areas, willows are the perfect way to go. Now this one that I have here, this particular variety, is called Mount Osso. And of course they want full sun. It's hardy down to zone 4, which is fantastic. Water isn't an issue unless it's the summertime and you need to deep water it. So I would recommend when you go to plant these, plant them with a really good compost. Keep them well watered their first year, and then you can just back away. The only time I would ever water a willow is probably at the end of the summer when we haven't seen any rain for a while, because then they start to get pretty thirsty, and you just give them a real good soaking and they should be good to go until Mother Nature provides us with more ample water. Now this particular variety will get about 5 to 8 feet high. This is a shrub version of the pussy willows, and honestly when they get done blooming I will probably trim them in half, and that helps them create even more stems so that by the following year you can get more of these cool little catkins. And you can cut these and bring them inside. We use them in floral arrangements all the time here at the nursery. But yeah, they're just a lot of fun that way. So yeah, I just kind of think of them as having their little furry coats protecting their little flowers until their flowers start to bloom. So pussy willows are always, at least one or two, are always something fun to have in the yard. Okay, so there's 3 late bloomers. Yes, this isn't quite like blooming, but this is the part we like the most about these. But there's 3 late winter, early spring blooming plants for you that you can play with in your yard that will do great here in the Northwest. Okay, so by next week, we're going to be heading into February already. Hallelujah, can't wait. But that will also be the beginning of my Grow More 24 series, and I'll be covering everything, hopefully, just about everything you're going to need to know for the month of February. What it is you need to start doing out in the yard, to sowing seeds, what you can be planting, all that kind of stuff for the month of February. So stay tuned for that, for Grow More in 24, first episode for February. Alrighty. Of course, if you have any questions or any comments, you can leave those in the description box down below, or you can send me an email to gardenstylenwest@gmail.com. And if you're interested in our monthly newsletter, you can also go to sunnycrestnursery.com and just sign up with your email, and we will send you a newsletter once or twice a month, especially during this really fast growing season that we're getting ready to go into. There's so much to cover. We, of course, can't cover everything, but I try to highlight what the most important things are. And, of course, new products that we're getting here in the nursery. I'll be covering those in my videos as well, etc., etc. All right, you guys, get out there, get your hands dirty, and we'll talk soon. Bye for now.